The bullet hit his chest so hard he never heard the shot. For a split second, all sound vanished. No rifles, no shouting, no artillery. Just a violent, crushing punch in the center of his body, as if someone had swung a sledgehammer straight into his ribs. Jonathan Hart saw the sky tilt sideways. Then the rubble of the French street rushed up to meet him. He thought very clearly and without panic. So this is it. The taste of dust filled his mouth. His ears rang. Somewhere far away, someone was screaming for a medic. Boots pounded past his head. A second shot cracked, closer this time. Someone yelled, "Sniper, get down!" Hands grabbed his webbing and dragged him behind the rusted shell of a burned-out car. "Jesus Christ, he is hit in the chest," a voice said above him, breathless and terrified. "He is done. He is done." Jonathan tried to breathe and felt nothing. No air, no pain, just a strange, numb pressure inside his chest, like his body belonged to someone else. He stared at the gray French sky and waited for the darkness to close in. It did not. "Jonathan, stay with me. Do you hear me? Stay with me," another voice barked. Sergeant Collins, New York accent. Too loud. Too close. Fingers clawed at the buttons of Jonathan's jacket, then yanked his shirt open. There was a metallic clink, like cutlery dropped on a kitchen floor. Someone swore. Someone else stopped breathing for a moment. "What the hell is that?" Collins whispered. Jonathan did not understand. Something cold slid off his skin and landed on the cobblestones beside his head. He turned his eyes just enough to see. A round piece of metal. Bent. Torn. Embedded deep in it, nose first, was a German rifle bullet. The silver dollar. Later, they would measure the distance. Later, they would argue about angles and velocity and the exact position of his body when the sniper fired. Later, they would pass that coin from hand to hand like a sacred relic. But that was all in the future. Right now, lying in the dirt of a street whose name he did not know, in a country he had never seen before the war, Jonathan stared at the ruined coin and finally truly understood what his father had tried to tell him on that last night in Pennsylvania. The night he had almost refused to take it. Pennsylvania, 2 years earlier. The kitchen clock read 1:17 in the morning. The house was dark except for the weak yellow light over the sink. Outside, the October wind pushed dry leaves along the road, making a sound like distant whispering. The train would arrive in less than 7 hours. At 8:30 sharp, he was due at the station with his duffel bag and his orders. Everyone else was asleep. His mother's soft, uneven breathing came from the bedroom at the end of the hall. His younger sister, Emma, had cried herself out hours ago. The whole house felt like it was holding its breath. Jonathan sat at the kitchen table in his undershirt, sleeves rolled up, staring at the enlistment papers he had already signed. He had read them 5 times. They did not seem real. The words United States Army looked like they belonged to someone else's life. A cigarette burned low between his fingers. He had started smoking the week after the draft notice came. Before that, he had always told his friends it was a stupid habit. Now he needed something to do with his hands. The back door creaked open. His father stepped in from the darkness, closing it carefully behind him. Thomas Hart was fully dressed, boots on, shirt buttoned, suspenders over his shoulders. He carried the smell of cold night air and old tobacco. His limp was more pronounced at this hour, when the pain medication had worn off. "You are not sleeping," Thomas said. It was not a question. "Neither are you," Jonathan replied. Thomas looked at the half-burned cigarette. "You hate those?" Jonathan shrugged. I hated a lot of things before the draft board called my name. Thomas pulled out a chair and sat down across from him. For a moment, neither of them spoke. The clock ticked. The wind scraped at the windows. Somewhere in town, a dog barked once and then fell silent. "You scared?" Thomas asked. Jonathan waited for the usual answer to come. The one he had given his friends, the neighbors, the girls who had signed his picture the night of the farewell dance. "No, just doing my duty. No, the Germans bleed same as we do. No, it will be over in a year." Instead, he heard himself say, "Terrified." Thomas nodded once, as if he had been waiting for Jonathan to finally tell the truth. "Good," he said. "A man who says he is not afraid of war is either lying or too stupid to stay alive." Jonathan looked up sharply. His father almost never spoke about war. The stories of France and the trenches and the gas sat behind his eyes like shadows, but he almost never brought them out. When people in town asked, he would just say, "We did what we had to do," and change the subject. Thomas reached into his pocket and placed a small cloth pouch on the table between them. It made a dull sound when it landed. Jonathan glanced at it, then back at his father. "What is that?" he asked. "Insurance," Thomas said. Jonathan snorted. "You cannot buy insurance for artillery shells and machine guns." "This kind you can," Thomas replied quietly. "Open it." Jonathan loosened the string and tipped the contents into his hand. A silver dollar slid out, heavy and cold. It was old, older than his father. The profile of Lady Liberty was worn but still clear. There were scratches, tiny pits, a deep groove near the edge. It did not shine like a new coin. It looked like something that had already seen too much. "A Morgan dollar," Thomas said. 1891. It has been in this family longer than you have been alive. Longer than I have, too. Jonathan rolled it between his fingers, unimpressed. "A lucky coin?" Thomas's jaw tightened. "Do not say it like that." "Like what?" "Like you are too smart to need it." Jonathan sighed and set the coin back on the table. "Dad, I appreciate it, I do, but you know this is just metal. It is not going to stop a bullet. It is not going to change whether I come home or not. That is up to training, tactics, and blind luck, and I am guessing the last part does not take American currency." Thomas leaned forward. "Pick it up." Jonathan hesitated, then did as he was told. The coin rested in his palm, heavier than he expected. "November 1918, Thomas began. His voice had changed, flatter, harder. "Argonne Forest. Our unit had been in the line for 12 days. No rest, no dry socks, no hot food, just mud, shell fire, and the smell of dead men." Jonathan shifted in his chair. He had heard fragments of this before, never the whole thing. "We were ordered to take a patch of woods the Germans had turned into a slaughterhouse. Machine gun nests, mortars, barbed wire. We went anyway. We always went anyway. There was a boy from Iowa in my squad. Name was Fisher. Face like a kid. He could not grow a proper mustache, no matter how hard he tried. Another boy whose name I cannot remember anymore. That is what bothers me the most. I can see his face, but his name is gone." Thomas's eyes were not in the kitchen anymore. They were in the trees, in the mud, in the screaming chaos of a war Jonathan had only seen in photographs. "We got caught in the open," Thomas continued. "Machine gun opened up from the tree line. The three of us dropped into a shell crater. Bullets chewed the ground around us. Could not move forward. Could not go back. We were stuck. I could hear the Germans shouting to each other while they reloaded. I knew that as soon as they were ready again, they would walk rounds across that crater, until all three of us were pieces. His hand came down on the table once, lightly, but the sound made Jonathan flinch. "Fisher lost it," Thomas said. He started sobbing, saying he could not die in a hole like an animal. I grabbed him, slapped him as hard as I could, told him to stay down. He looked me in the eye, nodded like he understood, then tried to run anyway. He made it 3 steps up the side of that crater. Thomas paused. "What happened?" Jonathan asked, even though he already knew. "His head snapped back," Thomas said. "Then his body fell forward like someone had cut the strings. He slid back into the crater on top of me. Blood everywhere, warm, sticky. He was dead before he hit me." The kitchen felt colder. "The other boys started praying out loud," Thomas said, "begging God to save him, promising he would be a better man. The kind of promises you make when you are bargaining with something you only half believed in before." A round hit the edge of the crater, sprayed dirt and rock. A fragment caught him in the throat. He drowned in his own blood, gurgling and clutching at my jacket. That left me alone in that hole with 2 dead boys and a gun team getting ready to finish the job. Jonathan swallowed. His mouth had gone dry. "I reached into my pocket," Thomas said, "and I felt that coin, this coin. My father had given it to me the day I shipped out. Said his father had carried it through another war and come home. I thought it was nonsense, just like you do, just like you are thinking right now. But sitting in that hole, with German gun barrels pointed my way, and no cover worth the name, I held on to that dollar like it was the only solid thing left in the world." He pointed at Jonathan's hand. "I did not pray to God," he said. "I prayed to every man who had carried it before me. I told them, 'You made it. I am your son. I want to make it too. I want to see my home again. I want to see my wife again. I want to hold the son we were supposed to have." Jonathan's throat tightened. He had never known this part. His parents had lost a child before him. It had never been talked about. 10 seconds later, Thomas said, our own artillery came down on that machine gun nest, right on top of it, close enough that I felt the blast in my teeth. Those Germans died before they could finish reloading. I crawled out of that crater with both of those boys still in it. I made it through the rest of the war, came home with a leg full of metal and this coin, and I married your mother. And when you were born, I told myself that if the world ever lost its mind again and sent you into hell, I would give you this dollar. Not because it stopped bullets, because when everything around you wants you dead, you need something in your hand that says, not yet. Silence settled between them, heavy, uncomfortable. Finally, Jonathan said quietly, that was just timing. Artillery schedules. Chance. Thomas nodded. Absolutely, it was chance. But when you are in a place where chance is the only thing between you and a shallow grave, you hold on to anything that gives you a reason to think you might be the 1 man in 10 who makes it home. You call it superstition if you want. I call it survival. He pushed Jonathan's hand, closing his fingers around the coin. You are going into a modern war, Thomas said. Worse machines, deadlier weapons, faster planes. None of that changes what it feels like to be 19 and alone in a place where everyone is trying to kill you. When that moment comes, and it will come, I want your hand to find this, not empty air. Jonathan stared at his closed fist. He could feel the outline of the coin pressing into his skin. I do not want to be the kind of man who needs a lucky charm, he muttered. "You will not be," Thomas said. "You will be the kind of man who does everything he can to stay alive. Training, discipline, keeping your head down when the smart thing is to stay down. And when none of that is enough, when the dice are in the air and they have not landed yet, you will be the kind of man who is not too proud to accept one more edge, even if you do not understand it." He looked his son in the eye. "Put it in your breast pocket," he said, "over your heart. Humor your old man. If nothing else, when you are scared and alone in some field in Europe, you will feel that weight and remember that there is a house in Pennsylvania that expects you to walk back through its door." Jonathan sat there, the coin burning cold in his hand, and realized there was no way to refuse without breaking something between them that would never be repaired. He stood up, picked up his shirt from the back of the chair, and slid the coin into the left breast pocket. The metal settled against his chest with a small, solid thud. "Happy?" he asked. Thomas exhaled for the first time in what felt like minutes. "No," he said. "I will be happy when you are sitting at this table again, and that coin is still in your pocket." 7 hours later, at the train station, while the brass band played and the mayor gave a speech no one listened to, Jonathan felt dozens of hands clap his shoulders, heard a blur of voices telling him to make them proud, to give the Germans hell, to come back in one piece. His mother clung to him so hard he could barely breathe. Emma shoved a small folded note into his hand and turned away before he could read it. As the train whistle screamed and the cars began to roll, Jonathan leaned out of the open window to see his father one last time. Thomas did not wave. He stood with his hands in his pockets, watching the train move. Only when Jonathan's car drew level with him did he lift one hand and tap twice on his own chest, over his heart. Jonathan answered with the same gesture. He could not know that in less than 2 years, a German sniper would put a crosshair on that exact spot. He could not know that the decision he made in a dim Pennsylvania kitchen in the middle of the night would be the only reason he would ever get the chance to come home. The first thing that hit him in France was the smell. Not the ocean, not the salt, not the diesel from the ships. Rot, wet canvas, smoke, burned metal. A thick, sour odor that crawled into his nose and stayed there. It smelled like something had died and the world had just decided to live with it. June 1944, Normandy. Jonathan stumbled down the ramp of the transport ship with his duffel bag digging into his shoulder and his rifle slapping against his side. The harbor behind him was a forest of masts and cranes and floating piers, all thrown together in a way that looked impossible and yet somehow worked. The artificial port at Omaha was buzzing, groaning, creaking under the weight of an army being fed into the continent. He had imagined Europe as a place from postcards. Stone streets, quiet churches, people in neat clothes. Instead, everything felt provisional. Mud where there should have been roads, tents where there should have been houses, wreckage piled up in corners like someone had broken the world and was still deciding which parts to keep. His unit, Charlie Company, 313th Infantry, was herded off the dock and onto trucks by men whose uniforms were already stained and faded in ways his brand new gear was not. The veterans did not look like the posters back home. They looked tired. Their eyes went to the newcomers' faces the way a man checks a horse he is not sure will carry a load. "Fresh meat," someone muttered from the back of a passing jeep. The truck jolted forward. As they rolled away from the port, Jonathan looked out over the remains of the invasion beach. Landing craft were scattered like toys, some twisted open, some half sunk, some burned black. In the shallow water, a tank lay on its side, turret, half submerged. Men had died in that steel box, with no way out. He could not stop imagining them pounding on the inside of the hatch as the water came in. The others in the truck saw it too. Conversations died. Faces tightened. A kid from Chicago, who had been joking nonstop since they left England, went quiet and stared at his boots. "Eyes up, Hart," Sergeant Collins said from across the bed of the truck. "You are in it now. No point pretending you are not." "Yes, Sergeant," Jonathan said. He kept his eyes up. The closer they got to the front, the more the countryside changed. The postcard Normandy from the training lectures was there in pieces. Hedgerows, stone farmhouses, orchards, but everything was scarred. Trees snapped in half, walls blown open, fields cratered. Livestock wandered loose, ribs showing, eyes wild. The truck stopped in what had once been a farmyard. Now it was a makeshift assembly area. Men shouted. Radios crackled. A line of wounded shuffled toward a triage tent, some supported by medics, some walking under their own power with faces that said their minds were still somewhere else. "Welcome to France," Collins said as they climbed down. "Drop your bags where you see the other bags. Keep your rifles with you. They do not get a nap." Jonathan followed the rest of his platoon to a row of tents. Sleep was a rumor. Orders came faster than fatigue. That night, he lay on a cot that sagged in the middle and listened to artillery in the distance. It sounded like a storm that never moved closer and never went away, just rolled and rolled across the horizon. Each flash through the tent canvas reminded him that those explosions were not in the sky. They were landing on roads, fields, houses. On men he would meet tomorrow if they survived the night. His hand drifted, as it had on the ship and on the truck, to the left breast pocket of his jacket, hanging from a nail above him. He could feel the outline of the silver dollar even through the fabric. Solid. Familiar. He did not believe in luck, but he believed in not taking chances. 3 weeks later, Charlie Company got its first real mission beyond patrols and road security. Saint-Laurent-sur-Mer was the kind of place he would never have heard of in peacetime. A small town, stone houses crowded along narrow streets, a church spire, a few shops. Now it was a name on a map with red pencil lines drawn around it. The Germans had fallen back from the beaches, but were far from beaten. They were good at leaving surprises behind. Machine gun nests, mortars, and snipers. "Listen up," Captain Miller said, standing in front of a crude map tacked to a barn wall. He was in his early 30s, but looked older, with deep lines at the corners of his mouth. His helmet bore fresh scrapes from something that had come too close. "We are moving through the town, street by street. 2nd platoon takes the north side. 3rd takes the south. 1st locks down the square and covers the approach. Assume every window and every doorway has a rifle behind it until you see otherwise. No one plays hero. You see something move, you call it out. You do not chase shadows alone." He tapped a spot near the center of the town. "Intelligence thinks there is at least one sniper working this area," he said. "He has tagged 3 of our boys in the last 48 hours. 1 shot, then gone, before anyone gets a fix. This bastard knows what he is doing. You keep your heads down and your helmets on. If you have to cross a street, you do it fast and low. Clear?" A low murmur of, "Yes, sir," rippled through the barn. Jonathan's stomach tightened. He had heard the stories. Snipers were different from machine guns or artillery. Those were impersonal, random. A sniper was a mind on the other end of the scope, choosing, looking for the small mistake that separated the man who lived from the man who did not. As they moved out, Saint-Laurent-sur-Mer looked almost peaceful from a distance. The church steeple still stood. A few trees still had leaves. Smoke rose from some chimneys. But the closer they got, the more irregularities appeared. A roof half gone. A wall peeled open by shell fire. A cart abandoned in the middle of the road. One wheel missing. Dried blood on the wood. They entered the first street in staggered formation. Boots on cobblestone, weapons up, eyes scanning windows and rooftops. It felt like walking into a photograph he had seen in the newspapers. Except the smell was stronger, and his heart was moving too fast. A dog trotted out of an alley, ribs visible, tail tucked. It stopped, looked at them with yellow eyes, then vanished again. A curtain twitched on the second floor of a house, and everyone froze, rifles snapping up as if controlled by the same string. "Hold," Collins said quietly. He watched the window for 5 long seconds. Nothing moved. "False alarm. Keep moving. Stay sharp." Every doorway looked like an ambush. Every pile of rubble looked like it could hide a man with a rifle. Jonathan's brain tried to track every angle at once. It was impossible. His world narrowed to the circle of buildings directly around his squad and the pressure of the coin against his chest every time he took a breath. They cleared one building, then another. Furniture overturned, drawers pulled out, personal things scattered. A child's toy on the floor, a doll missing an arm, a dress hanging in a wardrobe, half covered in dust, but still smelling faintly of soap. Jonathan stepped around a broken mirror and caught his own reflection in a shard on the floor. Helmet too big, eyes too wide. He barely recognized himself. "Move, Hart," Collins said from the doorway. "Stare at yourself later. Germans now." They pushed on. The first shot came an hour into the advance. It was not aimed at Jonathan. It was aimed at the man 3 steps in front of him. Private Danny Russo from Brooklyn had been talking nonstop since England. Jokes, stories, complaints about the coffee, about the food, about the officers. He had a photograph of his girlfriend folded into his helmet liner and showed it to anyone who would look. Dark hair, big eyes, a smile that made him look softer than the wise cracks he threw around. He was halfway across an intersection when the sound tore the air. It did not sound like the rifles from training. It was sharper, meaner, a hard crack that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. 1 second Russo was moving, the next his head snapped to the side, and his helmet flew off. He dropped like someone had cut a rope. "Sniper! Down!" someone shouted. Jonathan hit the ground so fast his knees scraped on the stone. He slid behind a chunk of broken wall, heart pounding, mouth open. He could not see Russo's face, just his boots and the way his body lay twisted, one arm outstretched toward a doorway he had never reached. No one moved to help him. No one could. "Do not go out there," Collins barked as a medic shifted, instinctively ready. That is exactly what he wants. He is watching the body. He is waiting for a second target. A second shot cracked. A puff of dust jumped from the edge of the wall inches from Jonathan's cheek. Stone chips stung his skin. He flattened himself against the ground, breathing through his teeth, feeling every beat of his heart slam against the coin in his pocket. Another shot from farther down the street. Then silence. The sniper had fired 3 times and vanished. It took them 20 minutes to move again. When they finally reached Russo, the medic only had to look once. The back of his head was blood and bone. The photograph from his helmet liner lay a few feet away, face down, on the stone. Jonathan picked it up without thinking and turned it over. The girl in the picture still smiled, frozen in a moment that no longer existed. He tucked the photograph into Russo's pocket and buttoned it closed. That night, back in the relative safety of a ruined farmhouse being used as a temporary billet, the sniper was all anyone talked about. He took that shot like he had all the time in the world, one man said. Did you see the angle? It was clean. No panic. That was not some kid with a rifle. That was a pro. He was waiting for us, another said. Like he knew we were coming. Like he knew exactly which intersection we would cross at what time. How does he do that? How does he know? Stories started to spread. He was a veteran from the Eastern Front. He had 100 kills. 200. He wore a necklace with dog tags from every man he had shot. He could hit a man's eye at 400 yards. Every rumor made him more dangerous, less human. Jonathan lay awake on the floor, his back against the cold stone wall, listening. He did not add to the stories. He did not try to correct them. The sniper was out there, somewhere in the darkness beyond the ruined roofs, cleaning his rifle, picking the next street, the next window, the next vantage point. Jonathan's hand went to his pocket again. The silver dollar was warm from his skin. He pressed his thumb into it until it hurt. Training had warned him about machine guns, about mortars, about tanks. They had diagrams, charts, kill zones. There was a procedure for everything. No one had ever explained how to live with the knowledge that an unseen eye might be looking at you through a scope, right now, from some black rectangle in the night. The next morning, they got their new orders. Saint-Laurent-sur-Mer had been only the beginning. The real objective was further south, near a town whose name they had trouble pronouncing. Saint-El? The fighting there was already brutal. The Germans were dug in among the hedgerows and the ruins, fighting for every field and every street. Charlie Company would be moving closer. As they assembled in the half-collapsed barn to receive the briefing, the men were quieter than before. Russo's empty space in the line felt huge. Jonathan could see Captain Miller's jaw working as he looked at them, weighing what to say and what to leave unsaid. "We are pushing forward," Miller said. "The enemy is falling back, but making us pay for every yard. You did good work yesterday. You kept your heads. You did not panic. That is why more of you are standing here today than would be otherwise. The sniper is still out there. Maybe the same one, maybe another. It does not matter. You treat every open space like a kill zone. You do not silhouette yourself in windows. You do not stand in doorways. You do not give some German with a scope the satisfaction of picking you off because you got lazy." He looked around the room, eyes stopping on each man, one by one. "I cannot promise all of you will make it home," he said. "No honest man can promise that. But I can promise this. If you listen, if you think, if you move like men who understand that death is not abstract anymore, you will give yourselves a chance. And sometimes, a chance is all you get." When they stepped out of the barn and formed up to move again, Jonathan fell into place with the rest. The road ahead wound between hedgerows and fields scarred by shellfire. Somewhere beyond those fields was Saint-El? Somewhere in the ruins of that town, if the rumors were right, a sniper had made it his hunting ground. Jonathan adjusted the strap of his rifle, took a breath, and felt the familiar weight against his chest. He did not know it yet, but the man behind that scope already had a position chosen, a rifle cleaned, and a bullet that was, in a very real way, already on its way toward him. By the time they reached the outskirts of St. El, the town did not look like a town anymore. It looked like someone had picked it up, shaken it until everything inside broke, then dropped it again. Roofs were gone. Walls leaned at wrong angles. Entire blocks were flattened into piles of brick and splintered beams. Trees stood black and leafless, their branches snapped like bones. Artillery had been pounding the area for days. The sky above the ruins still flickered with distant flashes. The smoke hung low, trapped between the hills, turning the air thick and hard to breathe. "This used to be a market square," Sergeant Collins said as they moved through what had to be a street. "Fresh bread, cheese, wine. Now look at it." Jonathan did not want to imagine the before. The after was enough. Charlie Company had been fighting around St. El for days now. The town was a maze of rubble, choke points, and half-collapsed houses perfect for ambushes. The Germans were stubborn. They fell back when they had to, then turned every new line of broken stone into another defensive position. And somewhere in that chaos, the sniper was waiting. By then, the sniper was not just a threat. He was a presence, a name without a face. Men swore they could feel him before he fired. A prickle on the back of the neck, a sudden urge to duck without knowing why. Some called him the Ghost. Others preferred that bastard. No one said his name because he did not have one. All they knew was his work. A corporal from another company dropped with a neat hole in his forehead as he leaned around a doorway for half a second too long. A radio operator took a bullet through his set, the metal exploding into his back. A medic was hit while reaching for a bandage. Always one shot, always from somewhere no one could pinpoint in time. By the time they looked, the window was empty, the rooftop silent. The sniper did not spray bullets. He did not waste rounds. He chose. On August 15th, just after noon, Jonathan felt the choosing. They had been tasked with clearing a section of ruined street that led toward what was left of the town center. Their objective sounded simple on paper. Move up, secure the crossroads, hold until relieved. In reality, it meant one thing: move through a killing ground and try not to die. The air was hot and stale. Dust clung to their faces, mixed with sweat. They moved in short rushes from one patch of cover to the next. A doorway, a broken wall, a burned-out car that had melted into the pavement. "Third squad, you take the left side," Captain Miller ordered, pointing with his map case. "Second, you are on the right. Keep your spacing. No bunching up. If he is out there, do not give him two of you for the price of one." Jonathan's squad fell into position. Collins led, eyes scanning windows. Rifle ready. Jonathan was 2 men back, close enough to hear Collins breathe when everything else went quiet. "Check that alley," Collins said, nodding to a narrow gap between 2 shattered buildings. "Hart, Miller, with me. The rest of you hold the corner and watch those upper floors. If you see glass move, you yell." The alley was choked with debris. Broken bricks, chunks of plaster, a door blown off its hinges. Somewhere inside, a pipe dripped steadily. The sound echoed in the confined space, too loud. Jonathan forced his boots to step where Collins stepped, avoiding places where the rubble looked unstable. Every footfall felt like it might be the one that made the sniper's crosshairs pause, then commit. Nothing moved in the alley. No Germans, no muzzle flash, just the steady drip and the distant thud of artillery miles away. "Clear," Collins muttered. "Back out, slow and low." They reversed, one at a time, never turning their backs fully on the dark opening. When they reached the main street again, the rest of the squad was where they had left them. No one dead. No one hit. For a moment, Jonathan let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, the sniper was somewhere else that day, hunting someone else. "Next block," Collins said. "Same formation. Stay." The shot cracked through the air like a whip. A man at the far end of the street jerked and fell. It was not one of theirs. A runner from another platoon, carrying a message, had chosen the wrong moment to cross an open gap between buildings. "Down!" Collins roared. Everyone hit the ground, but there was no follow-up shot. Not yet. "Did anyone see it?" Captain Miller shouted from behind a pile of rubble. "Anyone catch the flash?" Silence. Just the ringing in their ears. Jonathan's heart hammered against his ribs. He pressed himself against the side of a broken wall, as low as he could go. Dust got into his nose and mouth, making him want to cough. He held it in. Minutes passed. The sniper did not fire again. He did not need to. One shot meant they were all on the floor, pinned. One shot meant control. "We cannot sit here all day," Miller said at last, voice low but steady. "He will wait us out. We have to move. Short bounds. No one stands up full height if they can help it. We keep to cover. We do not give him clean shots." Jonathan knew, intellectually, that the captain was right. Staying put forever was not an option. But knowing that and convincing his muscles to move were two different things. "Third squad, you take that side of the street," Collins said, pointing to the left. "We will cover you. Leapfrog. We move when you are set. Nobody breaks pattern. Nobody decides to be brave." They moved. Short dashes from one ruin to the next. Drop. Breathe. Wait. Listen. Then the next group moved. The whole world shrank to the 10 yards between where you were and where you had to get. Somewhere up ahead, the street ended in a crossroads. 4 directions. 4 potential sight lines. 4 chances for someone with a scope to end you. When it was Jonathan's turn to move, his back was slick with sweat. His fingers slipped slightly on the wood of his rifle. He forced himself to loosen his grip. White-knuckling did not help aim. "On 3, Collins whispered. 1, 2, 3. They ran. Boots on broken stone. The sound of breathing, loud, in his own ears. The ruin they were headed for had once been a shop. The front was blown out, but a section of wall remained, jutting into the street at an angle. It looked like decent cover. Almost there. The second shot of the day came then. Later, they would argue about whether Jonathan heard it first or felt it first. Time stretched, warped by adrenaline. In his memory, there was no sound, no sense of distance, just impact. Something slammed into his chest, center mass, just above the heart. It felt like being hit by a truck. Every molecule of air in his lungs exploded outward. His legs stopped working. His rifle flew from his hands. The sky spun. For a fraction of a second he was standing. Then he was on his back, looking straight up at a stone-colored sky full of smoke and dust and nothing else. The world muted. The shouts around him became muffled, like they were coming through a wall. He did not think about God. He did not think about bravery or honor or country. He thought one clear thought, the same as on the training ground back in the States, when an instructor had demonstrated how fast a man could die. That is it. There was no pain at first, just a deep, crushing pressure in his chest, as if someone had driven a fist into his sternum and left it there. His fingers twitched. His toes did not respond. "Man down! Heart is hit! Heart is hit!" someone yelled. Hands grabbed his webbing and dragged him sideways. His helmet slipped, then caught on the back of his head. His vision filled with fragments. Colin's face above him, veins standing out in his neck as he shouted. A jagged edge of wall. A dark window, 2 floors up, where, for a heartbeat, he thought he saw movement. Another shot cracked. Stone shattered inches from Collins's arm. He swore and flattened himself against the wall, dragging Jonathan the rest of the way with a grunt. "Stay with me, Hart!" Collins shouted too loud. "You are all right. You are all right." Jonathan tried to speak. Nothing came out. His chest felt locked. His ears rang like artillery shells were going off right next to his head. The medic slid into view. Private Sanders, pale, sweating, hands already moving to Jonathan's chest. "Where is he hit?" Sanders demanded. "Dead center," Collins said. "He took it in the chest. I saw him jerk." Sanders's hands went to the buttons of Jonathan's jacket, fumbling them open. He yanked the fabric aside, then stopped. "What the hell?" he whispered. Collins leaned in, eyes narrowing. "What? What is it?" Sanders did not answer right away. His face changed. Confusion, then disbelief, then something like fear. Lodged in the center of Jonathan's chest, just above where his heart would be, was a blackened, torn hole in the fabric. The skin beneath it was red and bruised, already swelling, but not open. No blood spurting. No wound the size a rifle round should make. Sanders reached down with 2 fingers and plucked something out from under the cloth. It came free with a metallic scrape and fell onto the rubble beside Jonathan's shoulder with a sharp, heavy clink. A silver dollar. Or what used to be one. The coin was bent almost in half. The metal around the impact point was peeled back, jagged. Embedded in its center, flattened and twisted, was the German sniper's bullet. For a second no one spoke. Jonathan stared at it, his brain trying to catch up. His chest burned now, a deep, radiating ache that made it hard to breathe. But he was breathing. Air was getting in, getting out. He was not dead. Collins exhaled a curse that sounded almost like a prayer. "You have got to be kidding me," he said. Sanders picked up the coin with shaking fingers and turned it over. The back was dented, the design almost obliterated by the force of the hit. "That would have gone straight through his heart," Sanders said, voice unsteady. "Straight through. It is dead center." Jonathan tried to lift his head. Pain flared and pushed him back down. He managed to move his eyes enough to see the ruined coin in Sanders' hand. The silver dollar his father had pressed into his palm in a quiet kitchen in Pennsylvania. The coin he had almost refused to take. The world snapped back into focus. Sound rushed in. Gunfire, shouting. The distant boom of artillery. Someone further down the street returning fire toward the suspected sniper nest. The scrape of boots on stone as more men moved to better cover. "Is he alive?" Captain Miller's voice cut through the noise as he slid into cover beside them. "He is alive," Sanders said. "Bruised like hell. Maybe cracked ribs. But the bullet did not get through. Coin took it." Miller looked at Jonathan, then at the coin, then back at Jonathan. "That in your pocket?" he asked. Jonathan forced air into his lungs, each breath a small explosion of pain. Yes, sir," he rasped. Miller shook his head slowly, as if he could not quite accept what he was seeing. "Remind me to take you to a card game when this is over," he said. Another shot cracked from somewhere up the street, but this one went wide. The sniper had taken his best shot and, somehow, failed. Adrenaline and anger surged through the American line. They began to move with a different kind of energy now. The sniper had gone from an invisible hunter to a man who had missed. That changed things. He could still kill. He was still deadly. But he was not invincible. As the squad reorganized, Collins leaned close to Jonathan's ear. "Can you move?" he asked. Jonathan tested his fingers, his arms, his legs. Everything hurt, but nothing was numb in the way that meant permanent darkness. "I think so," he said. "You are not going anywhere near the front of the formation for the rest of the day," Collins said. "You already used up your miracle." He reached down, took the ruined coin from Sanders, and pressed it into Jonathan's hand. "Do not lose that," he said. "You just became the luckiest son of a bitch in this entire war." Jonathan closed his fingers around the twisted metal. It bit into his palm, edges sharp, blood warm where it cut. He welcomed the sting. Out there in the shattered buildings, the sniper was relocating, crawling to a new position, cycling a new round into the chamber. He had just seen something that did not make sense through his scope. A man drop, then rise again. He would be thinking about that, even as he prepared to fire again. For the first time since arriving in France, Jonathan felt something other than fear when he thought about the unseen man hunting them. He felt anger. The bullet that should have killed him had not. It had hit a circle of silver, passed down through 3 generations of men who had walked into wars and come home. The coin had done its job. Now Jonathan had to decide what to do with the second chance it had bought him. They got him out of the street like he was made of glass. 2 men under his arms, another pushing from behind, the medic hovering close in case his legs suddenly decided to stop working. Jonathan's chest felt like someone had dropped an anvil on it, every step sending a bolt of pain through his ribs. But he stayed on his feet. He refused the stretcher twice until the medic swore at him and gave up. "Fine, walk then," Sanders snapped. "But if you pass out, I am not apologizing when your face meets a rock." They ducked into what had once been a small shop. The sign out front was shattered, the windows gone, glass crunching under their boots. Inside, shelves lay overturned. Cans, broken jars, and scraps of paper littered the floor. Someone had dragged in a few crates to use as makeshift benches. "This is your hospital for now," Collins said. "Sit." Jonathan sat. The adrenaline was gone now. What was left was pain, a deep, throbbing ache that made it hard to think about anything else. Sanders unbuttoned his shirt again and gently pressed around the bruised area. "You are lucky," the medic said. "I mean ridiculously lucky. You have got bruising, maybe a cracked rib, but nothing is broken clean through. Your heart is beating like a rabbit, but it is beating. Without that coin, I would be zipping you into a bag right now." He glanced at the ruined silver dollar resting on a crate nearby. The word lucky hung in the air. "Can he fight?" Collins asked. "In a straight-up sprint?" "No," Sanders said. "He will feel every breath for a while. But he can move, he can shoot, and he is not going to bleed out on us. If you can spare him, I would send him back to the aid station for a day. If you cannot, then he stays behind cover and tries not to be a bullet magnet again. Collins looked at Jonathan. You want to go back? Jonathan knew the smart answer. He should say yes, get patched up, spend a night somewhere that did not involve a man in a tower trying to put a hole in him. No one would call him a coward for it. He had already taken a round that should have killed him. But the memory of Russo's body in the intersection, of the medic pinned down by fire, of the sniper's unseen eye behind the scope, it all pressed harder than the pain in his chest. I can still shoot, Jonathan said. I stay. Collins did not argue. He just nodded once, like he had expected that answer. Then you stay, he said. But you do what I say, when I say it. You do not pop up to prove you are invincible. You are not. He picked up the coin from the crate and weighed it in his hand. Your old man gave you this? He asked. Yeah, Jonathan said. Said it had been through wars before. I thought it was just a story. Collins snorted. Some story. He turned the coin so the others could see. Word had already started to spread outside. By the time the first curious faces appeared in the doorway, the shape of the tail had begun to form. Is it true? One of the riflemen asked. Sniper? Hit you dead center? And you are still breathing? Let me see that thing, another said, stepping in closer. Collins held up a hand. One at a time. Nobody drops it. You drop it. I make you dig your own grave now, so we do not have to do it later. He passed the coin to the nearest man. It moved around the room like a tiny, heavy planet, pulling eyes and hands toward it. Each man turned it over, tracing the path of the bullet with calloused fingers. The impact point, the torn metal, the way the round had flattened and embedded instead of going through. Jesus, someone whispered. That is a perfect heart shot. Look at the angle, another said. He must have had him perfectly lined up. This would have killed anyone else, a third added. Any other day. Sanders nodded. You are right. It should have. Jonathan watched their faces as they held the coin. Fear did not vanish, but something shifted. Until now, the sniper had been a ghost that only took. He appeared, killed, and disappeared, leaving nothing but bodies and questions behind. Now, for the first time, there was a story where he had failed. And not just failed, been denied by something small enough to fit in a pocket. Pass it here, a voice said from the back. Captain Miller had stepped into the shop. Dust streaked his uniform. His helmet was pushed back slightly, sweat darkening the strap under his chin. He held out his hand, and the coin dropped into it with a soft weight. Miller studied it without speaking. His thumb traced the crater where the bullet had struck. This came through Argonne? He asked Jonathan, still looking at the metal. Yes, sir, Jonathan said. My father carried it. Miller turned it over again, then closed his fist around it for a moment as if testing its reality. You believe in this? He asked. Jonathan thought about lying, about giving the bravado answer. No, sir, just metal. Got lucky, that's all. Instead, he said, I believe I am still here. A corner of Miller's mouth twitched. Fair enough, he said. He opened his hand and looked at the squad. Men believe what they need to believe to move forward under fire, he said. Some talk to God, some talk to the dead, some rub a rabbit's foot or kiss a photograph. I do not care what you hold on to as long as you keep moving toward the objective when the time comes. He held up the coin. If this, he went on, helps any of you step into a street you would otherwise freeze in, then as far as I am concerned, it is the most valuable piece of property in this entire town." He turned back to Jonathan and tossed the coin once, catching it again. "But it belongs to Hart," he added. "Remember that." He put the coin back in Jonathan's hand. The metal was warm from everyone's touch. The rumor did not stay in that room. By evening, men from other platoons were drifting in with excuses to check on the wounded guy and leaving after asking, casually or not, if they could see the bullet-stopped coin. They all reacted the same way. A low whistle, a shake of the head, a nervous laugh that had more relief than humor in it. "Let me hold it before we go out tomorrow," one man said. "Just for a second, just in case." "Me too," another added. "Cannot hurt, right?" Jonathan hesitated the first few times. It felt strange, handing over something that had just taken a bullet for him. But he saw their eyes, the tightness around them, the way their hands flexed when they talked about open streets and high windows. The coin did not erase their fear. Nothing could. But it gave them something to focus on besides the invisible barrel pointed at them. So he started a ritual. Before each patrol, as they checked weapons and adjusted helmets, he would sit on a crate or a chunk of broken wall and hold out the coin. 10 seconds, he would say. "Nobody runs off with my family heirloom." They lined up, half joking, half not. Some rubbed it between thumb and forefinger. Some pressed it briefly to their own breast pocket, mirroring the place it had rested over Jonathan's heart. A few closed their eyes for a moment, lips moving silently, as if sending a quick message somewhere, up, down, or back home. It spread. Soon, men from other companies started showing up. Word had traveled down the line. "There is a guy in Charlie whose coin stopped a sniper round. Go touch it before you roll out." "Superstition," Collins muttered the first time he saw a line forming that did not include his own men. But he did not stop it. He was in that line too. He did it casually, as if it did not matter, as if he was just humoring the others. He took the coin, weighed it in his hand, gave Jonathan a look that said, "If you tell anyone I did this, I will kill you," then handed it back without comment. The numbers told their own story. In war, patterns were dangerous things to believe in. Men saw connections everywhere, signs in clouds, meaning in dice rolls. But over the next week, the company noticed something that was hard to ignore. They were still taking fire. They were still moving through kill zones and ruined streets where death could come from any direction. They still lost men. There was no magic shield, no halo. But on the days when Jonathan and his coin were with the lead elements, the casualty lists were shorter. Wounds instead of funerals. Close calls instead of clean kills. It could have been coincidence. Statistically, it probably was. No one cared. "Bring Hart's coin," someone would say quietly when a new mission briefing began. "We are going to need it." The coin changed Jonathan too. Before the shot, he had been like everyone else, afraid, alert, doing his job, waiting for the day the odds turned the wrong way, with his name on them. Afterward, men looked at him differently. A few clapped his shoulder more than necessary. Others asked him, half joking, if they could stand next to him when things got bad. "You are like a walking rabbit's foot now," one of them laughed. The comparison made Jonathan uncomfortable. He did not feel lucky when he woke up at night with the phantom impact of the bullet slamming into his chest again and again. He did not feel lucky when he watched new replacements arrive with fresh faces. and tried not to wonder which ones would be dead by the end of the month. But when he held the coin, when he felt the jagged edge of the torn metal against his skin, he felt something else. A line, a connection. His grandfather in a different uniform, his father in a different continent, now him in this ruined French town. 3 wars, 1 piece of silver. One day, as they waited in a half-collapsed cellar for orders to move, Collins sat down next to him, back against the same wall. "You ever think about why it was you?" the sergeant asked, not looking at him. "Why that bullet hit your coin and not, say, Miller's Canteen or my belt buckle?" Jonathan rolled the coin between his fingers. "All the time," he said. "Got an answer yet?" "No." Collins nodded. "Do not waste too much energy on it. Men drive themselves crazy trying to assign logic to things that are just chaos wearing a different hat." He paused, then added, more quietly, "But if the story we tell ourselves about that chaos keeps us moving, then maybe that story is as real as anything else." Jonathan looked at him. "You believe in it now?" Collins snorted. "I believe in anything that keeps these idiots' heads in the game. If that coin helps one man step out from behind a wall when he has to, instead of freezing and getting himself killed, then yeah, I believe in it." He jerked his chin toward the ruined street outside. "You know, they are starting to call it something," he said. "Word is, in Baker and Abel, they are talking about the heart dollar." Jonathan grimaced. "That is stupid." "Absolutely," Collins said. "So is walking toward gunfire because a stranger in a different country told you to. Welcome to the club." Days turned into weeks. The fighting around St. L, ground on, house by house, field by field. Each step forward was paid for, sometimes in blood, sometimes in nerves, sometimes in sleep that never came. Through it all, the coin kept making its quiet circuit through rough hands, before disappearing back into the pocket over Jonathan's heart. It did not stop all bullets. It did not turn every bad day into a miracle. What it did was simpler, and in its own way, more powerful. It gave men one more reason to believe in a place designed to strip belief away. In a war where steel and numbers were supposed to decide everything, one small circle of battered silver became the one thing they could point to and say, "This, right here, says we still have a chance." The war ended, but the coin did not. For a long time, Jonathan did not quite believe it was over. The official words said victory, surrender, peace. His body said something else. Every slammed door made his muscles tighten. Every car backfiring sent his heart into his throat. In his dreams, ruined streets and shattered windows were as real as the Pennsylvania fields outside his window when he finally came home. He stepped off the bus in Millbrook on a cool afternoon in late 1945 with one duffel bag, one rifle case he would not let anyone else carry, and the silver dollar sitting, as always, over his heart. The town looked smaller. The hardware store, the diner, the school, the church, they were all where he had left them. But the colors were wrong. Too bright. Too clean. No shell holes, no rubble. The air smelled like damp earth and cut wood, not cordite and burning flesh. His mother reached him first, arms around his neck, sobbing into his uniform. His sister Emma, older now, tried to say something and only managed a choked noise before she wrapped both of them in her arms. Over their heads, Jonathan saw his father. Thomas Hart stood a few steps back, hands in his pockets, jaw clenched so hard the muscles jumped. For a second, neither of them moved. The noise of the crowd at the bus stop faded. It was just the two of them, separated by 5 yards and 3 wars. Jonathan stepped forward. Thomas did too. They met halfway. There were no speeches, no big words. His father simply wrapped his arms around him and held on with a strength Jonathan had forgotten he had. "Welcome home, son," Thomas said, voice rough. "It worked," Jonathan whispered into his shoulder. His father pulled back just enough to look him in the eye. "What did?" Thomas asked, though he already knew. Jonathan reached into his pocket, fingers closing around the twisted circle of metal, and pressed it into his father's palm. Thomas looked down. For the first time since the Argonne, the coin had changed. It was not just worn and scratched anymore. It was deformed, bent around the path of a bullet that should have killed his son. The torn edge where the round had punched in and stopped was unmistakable. It had taken the hit that was meant for flesh and bone. Thomas's fingers trembled as he turned it over. "Sniper," Jonathan said quietly. "St. L? Center of the chest? Medic said without it, I would not have made it long enough for anyone to say my name." Thomas closed his hand around the coin like he was afraid the air might steal it. "I gave this to you so you would have something to hold when you were scared," he said. "I did not think—" He trailed off. Words failed him. Jonathan understood. There was no sentence big enough for what they were both thinking. That a decision made in a quiet kitchen in the middle of the night had intersected perfectly with a trigger squeeze on a ruined street halfway around the world. Inside the house, when the noise died down and the casseroles from neighbors were pushed aside, the two men sat at the kitchen table, where the coin had changed hands once before. Thomas set it between them. "I thought I would be giving this back," he said, pushing it slightly toward Jonathan. "It is yours now. It earned you more years. More than I ever could have given you." Jonathan looked at the dollar. The surface was scarred, almost unrecognizable. But in the right light, he could still see the ghost of the design. Liberty, battered, but present. "I do not know if I can carry it anymore," he admitted. "Every time I touch it, I am back there, on my back, cannot breathe, waiting for my heart to stop." Thomas nodded slowly. "Then you do not carry it to remember dying," he said. "You carry it to remember not dying." He slid the coin back toward his son. "Someday," he added, "you might have a boy of your own, or a girl. The world will find a new way to lose its mind. It always does. When that happens, you will have something real to put in their hand. Not a story, not a symbol, a thing that has already said no to death once." For years after the war, the coin stayed in a small box in Jonathan's dresser drawer. He opened it some nights when sleep would not come, when the headlines talked about new conflicts in places with unfamiliar names. Korea. Somewhere else. Another. The details changed. The pattern did not. His fingers traced the ruined edge, the mark where the bullet had died. Each time, the memories came. He let them. Then he closed the lid and went back to his life. He married. Not the first girl who smiled at his uniform, but the one who listened when he woke up breathing hard and staring at the ceiling. They had a son, then a daughter. The farm became a small business. Tractors replaced horses. The world moved forward. The coin waited. It did not demand attention. It simply existed. A weight in the dark. Patient. Decades later, a different war came into his living room. Not through letters or telegrams, but through the television. Vietnam was not like Europe. Jungle instead of hedgerows. Helicopters instead of marching columns. but the faces of the boys looked the same. Too young. Trying to look older than they were. Trying not to show fear. Jonathan's son, Michael, watched the nightly news with his father. Not every night. Enough. "Are you worried they will draft me?" Michael asked one evening, eyes on the screen. Jonathan looked at the boy. 17, tall, restless. The same age he had been when the world had decided his future for him. "Yes," Jonathan said simply. The draft did not take Michael. College timing, a lottery of numbers and birthdays kept him home. The coin stayed in the drawer. Years passed. Wars came and went, some large, some small, each with its own name, its own footage, its own dead. Jonathan grew older. His hair turned white. His hands developed the tremor his father's had had. The farm no longer needed him every day, then no longer at all. The house got quieter. Furniture outlasted conversations. Then came a new kind of war. This one started with a date burned into everyone's mind, and pictures of buildings falling in a city Jonathan had visited once as a boy. The names were different again. Afghanistan, Iraq, desert, mountains, cities half a world away. This time, it was not his son who signed up. It was his grandson. Adam Hart was 20 when he sat at the same kitchen table, posture straight, enlistment papers in front of him. The photographs on the wall had changed, new frames, new faces, but the light came through the window the same way it had when Thomas and Jonathan had sat there decades earlier. "You do not have to go," Jonathan said, even though he knew that, in some ways, the choice had already been made. "I know," Adam said. "But I cannot watch other people go fight this and just sit here. It does not feel right." There was no argument that would change that. Jonathan had learned a long time ago that when a young man decided to stand up, you could not make him sit back down by talking. You could only try to give him better armor than you had had. He stood up without another word and walked down the hall to his bedroom. The dresser drawer stuck slightly, the way it always had. He pulled it open, reached into the back corner, and took out the small box. For a second, he just held it. The weight was familiar and foreign at the same time. He had not opened it in months, maybe longer. He carried it back to the kitchen and sat down across from his grandson. Adam looked at the box, then at his grandfather's face. "What is that?" he asked. "Insurance," Jonathan said, and was surprised by how much his own voice sounded like his father's. He opened the lid. The coin lay inside on a scrap of dark cloth. Time had not been kind to it. The metal was tarnished, the bends and gouges more pronounced, but it was still undeniably what it had always been. A silver dollar that was no longer quite round. Adam leaned in. "What happened to it?" "A German sniper," Jonathan said. "France, 1944. He tried to kill me. Hit this instead." He told the story then. Not all at once, not in polished sentences, in pieces. The quiet kitchen at 1 a.m, his father's shaking hand. The street in St. L. The impact. The medic's face when he saw there was no hole where there should have been one. He told Adam about the line of men passing the coin before patrols. About the way it changed. Not the war, but the way they walked into it. When he finished, the kitchen was very quiet. Adam reached out and touched the edge of the coin with one finger. "Do you believe it is lucky?" he asked. Jonathan thought about that for a long moment. "I believe," he said finally, "that in a place where a lot of men died for no good reason, I did not. And this was between me and the bullet when it mattered." He pushed the box across the table. "My father gave this to me when it was just a story from another war," he said. "I am giving it to you with a story of my own attached." Adam stared at the coin like it might move on its own. "I do not know if I can carry something like that," he admitted. "What if it does not work this time?" "Then it is just a coin," Jonathan said. "You will still have your training, your partners, your instincts. You do not outrun fate by putting metal in your pocket. But when you are out there, and you are more scared than you have ever been, and everything in you wants to freeze, maybe feeling that weight over your heart will help you take one more step. That is all it ever did for me. That was enough." Adam picked up the coin. It was heavier than he expected. Cold. "Where do I keep it?" he asked. Jonathan tapped his own chest, just left of center. "Right there," he said. "Family tradition." Months later, in a country of dust and mountains, Jonathan would only ever see on the news a young soldier in desert camouflage stood behind a concrete barrier, waiting for orders, and slipped his hand into his pocket. His fingers found the familiar battered edge of a coin that had crossed 3 generations and 3 wars. He did not know every detail of the men who had carried it before him. He did not know exactly how close his grandfather had come to dying on that French street. He did not know all the names of the soldiers who had touched it, hoping a little of its story would rub off on them. He knew only that he was not the first heart to be scared in uniform, and that someone before him had faced a bullet meant for the heart and walked away. Back in Pennsylvania, an old man sat alone at a kitchen table, eyes on the clock, the television on mute. On the wall behind him hung a framed display. His uniform patch, his campaign ribbon, a black and white photograph of a much younger version of himself, standing with a group of men in front of a ruined church. The coin was not in the frame. It was somewhere far away, doing the only job it had ever really had. Not stopping bullets, carrying hope.